When Ethan came to break off the engagement, it wasn't long after he had the surgery. I heard that in order to persuade the elders of the family to agree to the cancellation of the engagement, he stubbornly held a family meeting that lasted for 12 hours and endured more than 30 lashes. Even though his wound burst open and he had a high fever, he refused to give in. Before his body had fully recovered, he couldn't wait to come and see me, with only two things in mind. First, he wanted to dissolve our engagement. Second, he wanted to pursue my younger sister. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. His face was pale, but his eyes were determined. Looking into those familiar eyes, I knew that Ethan had also been reborn. The corner of my mouth curled into a cold smile. I asked my assistant to bring the engagement agreement. I threw it into the shredder right in front of him. The document with our names on it turned into pieces and scattered into the wastepaper basket. Those amber eyes quivered slightly, and his voice was hoarse. "Thank you for your understanding." I turned around and left without a trace of nostalgia. I didn't even look at him again. "Ethan, from now on, we are completely cut off from each other and will be like strangers." The engagement that was originally mine was transferred to my sister. My mother was so angry that she shattered a wine glass. The deep red liquid splashed all over the floor. She pointed outside the door and roared, "That shameless woman, just like her fox-like mother, has blatantly stolen your fee and keys, the heir of the Ethan group. I shouldn't have let her stay in the Mia family in the first place." I quickly soothed my enraged mother. I couldn't blame her for being so angry. In her eyes, the marriage alliance with the Ethan group was an excellent choice. My father was just an ordinary businessman. We simply couldn't have gotten involved with a wealthy family like the Ethan group originally. It was just that when I was intern in college, I happened to help the old lady of the Ethan family who had a sudden heart attack at a charity dinner. Out of gratitude, the old lady also thought I was well educated and reasonable. That's how the engagement between Ethan and me was arranged. The Ethan group enjoyed a great reputation in the business world. Ethan was even hailed as a rising star in the business world. Many socialites and wealthy daughters had their eyes on him, but unexpectedly, I was the one he finally chose. It would be a lie to say that others weren't envious. My mother had always been proud of this engagement. Now, the engagement had fallen into the hands of my sister, Emma. Her mother had stolen my father, and now she had stolen my fiancé. No wonder my mother was so furious. The image of Emma flashed through my mind. She was bright and charming, looking pitiful. Although we weren't born of the same mother, we did bear some resemblance. She was more charming, while I was more intellectual. I poured my mother a glass of warm water again and consoled her. "Mom, although Ethan has broken off the engagement, there are plenty of good men in the world. Do you think I'm afraid I can't find a good husband?" My mother looked at me with a mixture of unwillingness and heartache. "But no matter how good others are, can they compare to the heir of the Ethan group?" I lowered my head. I let out a sigh in my heart. I said softly, "That's not necessarily the case. In my previous life, I married Ethan as I wished. At first, I was full of expectations. Since the engagement, I had been preparing to marry him. I studied his preferences and tried to become the person he idealized. But it wasn't until after we got married that I realized he never liked me. It was my younger sister, Ma, whom he liked. How much did he like her? After we got engaged, he was originally indifferent to me. But one day, he suddenly started to visit the Mia family frequently. After we got married, he always said that he was afraid I would be lonely and asked me to invite Emma to stay at our house. Even after Emma got married, he would, under the pretext of visiting relatives, invite her and her husband to gatherings. His concern for her was so cautious. He always did things in my name, not wanting to damage her reputation in the slightest. If I hadn't been tidying up the study and accidentally discovered a hidden room filled with her photos, I might never have known the truth. Only then did I realize. It all started at a business reception. At the reception, he fell in love at first sight with the girl. From then on, he was haunted by her, and it was engraved in his heart. That girl was Emma. In fact, I was also at that reception, but my memory of it was blurry. I only remembered that I received praise for my excellent business proposal. I also gave Emma a Cartier necklace. As for when Ethan met her, I had no idea at all. However, the wheels of fate had already started turning. Ethan fell in love with Emma at first sight. But at that time he was already engaged to me. This hidden feeling was destined to be his eternal regret. He fulfilled his promise and married me. But he gave his true heart to her. After I knew the truth, I was devastated and in pain. Then I became indifferent, and finally, numb. For 20 years, I did my best to be the president's wife, taking care of his family business and accompanying him in his career. But no matter how much I gave, I couldn't shake that figure in his heart. Even when we were being affectionate in bed, he called out Emma's name. I didn't want to continue living like this, so I jumped off the building of the Ethan group. I couldn't help but want to ask him. If we could do it all over again, would he still marry me according to the wishes of the family? When he came with the marriage agreement in the morning light, I knew the answer. No, I actually felt relieved in my heart. That's great. Because in this life, I don't want to be entangled with him anymore. After the engagement breaking incident, the atmosphere at home changed subtly. Amelia, who was already doted on by my father, became even more arrogant. My mother was so angry that she took to her bed. That day when I went to visit her in her room, I saw Emma kneeling outside my mother's room. And Ethan, who was trying to help her up beside her. They were a handsome man and a beautiful woman, a perfect match. I couldn't help but sneer. At this time, the annual business reception hadn't been held yet. According to the trajectory of my previous life, since Ethan got engaged to me, he had never taken the initiative to contact me, and we had only met a few times. Now that the engagement was broken off, he was actually coming frequently. I originally didn't want to pay attention. But Ethan had already seen me and then walked towards me. There was suppressed anger in his deep eyes. Mia, you know that the decision to break off the engagement was mine alone. Why are you making things difficult for Emma and making her kneel here? I'm telling you, the person I love will always be her. No matter what means you use, I won't turn back. What? I looked at Emma behind him. Her eyes were red, looking pitiful. I immediately understood that Ethan thought I had forced her to kneel here. It wasn't me. I was about to explain, but Ethan interrupted me. Enough. I know you've always disliked Emma, but can't you stop using such despicable means? You're just making me dislike you even more. After he finished speaking, he grabbed Emma and turned to leave. He didn't stop even when I called him. I picked up a water glass from the side and threw it at his back. He winced in pain and turned around to glare at me. I said coldly, I'll only say this once. I didn't make her kneel. Believe it or not. Ethan, you're not that important to me either. I don't have to have you. A trace of surprise flashed across his face. I didn't care what he thought and just left directly. I had endured enough in my previous life. This time, why should I wrong myself? I walked into my mother's room, and she was taking medicine. She wasn't actually seriously ill, just extremely angry. Lying in bed, she would occasionally curse Emma. I handed her some fruit and casually asked if she had made Emma kneel outside. My mother was surprised. She's kneeling outside? Then she snorted coldly. She's being sensible. She knows she's done something wrong and is kneeling to apologize. My mother's reaction confirmed my suspicion. Ma had indeed chosen to kneel there on her own. With this kneeling, outsiders would only think that my mother and I were punishing her because she had stolen the engagement. The reputation of being jealous, vicious, and narrow-minded would fall on me. In my previous life, I already knew that Emma wasn't as innocent and kind as she seemed on the surface. With Ethan's love for her for more than 20 years, could she really be completely unaware? I don't think so. My mother was still feeling complacent. I let out a sigh. No wonder my mother couldn't compete with Amelia. She had been trained in business by her parents since childhood, but they had neglected to cultivate her emotional intelligence. So although my mother could make money, she was straightforward in her personality and actions. How could she be a match for Amelia? In my previous life, I had been so focused on Ethan that I hadn't taken good care of my mother. Although my mother seemed strong, she must have endured a lot of grievances. Thinking of this, my heart softened. I walked to my mother's bedside, gently hugged her, and carefully analyzed Emma's intentions for her. My mother was so angry that she slapped the bedboard. Because of the provocation from Emma, my mother didn't want to stay in the hospital anymore. She took me for a full set of skincare treatments and then contacted Vivian. Vivian was a friend my mother met at a business reception. She is straightforward and doesn't care about trivial details, and enjoys an excellent reputation in the upper-class circle. Many wealthy family alliances in the circle were arranged by her. My mother was holding a grudge and determined to find me a better match than Ethan this time. Although I was helpless, I didn't want to disappoint her, so I let her do as she pleased. When we arrived, Vivian exchanged some pleasantries with my mother. Then she took out a stack of documents and said enthusiastically to me, "These are high-quality single men from good family backgrounds in the circle. Take a look, Mama. If there's anyone you're interested in, Auntie will help set you up." I thanked her and casually flipped through the documents. I originally planned to just go through the motions, but when I turned to one of the resumes, I couldn't take my eyes off it. The man in the photo was outstandingly good-looking, even more handsome than Ethan, who is known as a young master in the business world. However, he had a cold expression and sharp eyes, exuding an aura that said stay away. He was Daniel, the head of the military intelligence department, known as the Jade-Faced Asura. Daniel was the only son of the military commander. As the highest person in charge of the military intelligence department, he was tough in his methods, and many people were afraid of him. However, with his prominent family background and outstanding appearance, there were countless wealthy daughters who wanted to marry him. But if I remembered correctly, in my previous life, he seemed to have remained single all the time. I lowered my head and pondered. My mother suddenly leaned over and saw the document in my hand. "Oh, we can't afford this one." She quickly pulled the document out of my hand and put it aside as if it were a hot potato. There was a hint of fear in her eyes. On the way back from Vivian's house, she gently advised me not to consider Daniel, saying that he was beyond the reach of an ordinary family like ours. I assured her repeatedly, and she finally felt relieved. In fact, the reason I took a few extra looks at Daniel was not that I had any thoughts about him. It was just that I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, he had helped me. He wasn't as cold-blooded and heartless as rumored. It was not long after I discovered Ethan's hidden room. I was still trying to save our relationship. During the new year we went to a temple in the suburbs to pray for blessings. By chance, we met Emma, who had also come to pray on the same day. Ethan's eyes lit up immediately. Since they were relatives, Emma wanted to ride back with us on the way back. With so many people watching, although I was reluctant, I agreed. But on the mountain road, we encountered robbers. The robbers fought with the bodyguards, and gunshots rang out. I hid in the luxury car, trembling all over. Subconsciously, I wanted to get closer to Ethan. But Ethan didn't even look at me. He abandoned me and ran towards Emma's car. In the wind and snow, the sound of the engine faded away. I felt a salty taste in my mouth, and I realized that I had been crying. I completely gave up on him. Hiding all the time wasn't a solution. I ran out of the car and dashed in one direction. I didn't know whether it was lucky or not, but the robbers didn't chase after me. But I got lost. The snow was falling heavily, and I was so frozen that my consciousness was blurred. I almost thought I was going to die there. Just then, I saw Daniel in a black windbreaker. He came through the wind and snow. He took off his coat and draped it over me. Everyone said he was ruthless and heartless. But all I remembered was that he escorted me for a while when I was at my most helpless. After we got home, my mother and I were about to go back to our room to rest. But the servant came in a hurry and said that my father wanted to discuss something with us. My mother and I looked at each other, and we both saw the confusion in each other's eyes. My father had always ignored family matters. What could he want to talk to us about? When we went to the living room, we found that my father wasn't the only one there. Amelia and Emma were also there. Amelia warmly greeted my mother when she saw her. But after just a few words, she revealed her true purpose. In short, they wanted my dowry. What? My mother widened her eyes, suspecting that she had misheard. Amelia tittied her hair and smiled. Sister, after all, Emma is going to marry into the Ethan family. If her dowry is too little, it will make our Mia family lose face and make our master a laughingstock. Anyway, the dowry you originally prepared for Emma was going to the Ethan family. It's better to give it to Emma now. Emma can't find a suitable partner for the time being. You can prepare a dowry for her when she gets married in the future. Bullshit. As soon as my mother heard this, she exploded on the spot. She started cursing. The dowry I prepared for my daughter, why should I give it to you? She, Emma, a bastard, actually dares to covet the dowry of the legitimate daughter, in your dreams. Before she could say anything more unpleasant, I quickly held her back. Amelia ran to my father and started crying. My father waved his hand and said coldly, "Shrew." My gaze gradually turned cold. My father had never liked my mother. Although he was afraid of the power of my maternal grandfather's family and wouldn't go too far, it was a fact that he favored Amelia more. He thought my mother was too overbearing. Not as gentle and considerate as Amelia. He treated our daughters differently too. Although I was the daughter of the first wife, I wasn't valued by my father. He wasn't close to me either. At this moment, I looked at him and said, "Do you also agree to give my dowry to Emma, Dad?" My father avoided my gaze. "Anyway, since your engagement has just been broken off, no one will dare to marry you for a while. It's better to give it to Emma. It will save the family's face, and it's a win-win situation." Facing his undisguised favoritism, I sneered. It's a win-win situation indeed. Unfortunately, I don't agree. They had their own shrewd plans. My dowry was saved bit by bit by my mother. Not to mention how much of her private money she used to subsidize it, and some of the luxury items were custom made by my maternal grandfather's family. My mother didn't want me to be looked down upon when I married into the Ethan family, so everything she prepared was of the highest quality. Now they just opened their mouths and wanted to take it away. They were really thinking too beautifully. If you think that sister's dowry is not good enough, Dad, you can just give her some money to buy a few famous brand items. One thing though. I'm also your daughter, Dad. Whatever sister buys, I should have the same. You can't show favoritism. Otherwise, I will make a scene. You, my father's face turned livid. How have you become like this? You're as rude as your mother. Amelia also spoke in a sarcastic tone. The most important thing for a girl is to be gentle. The eldest lady even wants to compare herself with her own sister. No wonder she was dumped by the Ethan family. Let them say what they want. Anyway, I won't give in at all. In my previous life, I was gentle and virtuous all my life, but I ended up in such a miserable state. In this life, I figured it out. I can be happy, delighted, and touched by other people. But I won't waste my energy on pain, hatred, and sadness. So I looked at her calmly and asked, "You're so scheming, yet you've always pretended to be kind and innocent. Aren't you tired of living like this?" Ma's face twisted instantly. The luxury car stopped in front of the Jin Yuan. The Jin Yuan was the most high-end jewelry store in the city. The jewelry there had a wide variety of styles, and the materials were exquisite. It was deeply loved by the socialites of the upper class, and even many wealthy ladies came here to customize and purchase jewelry. Several of my dowry items were bought here, and my mother had also ordered a few pieces for me. I happened to be here to pick them up. However, there was a charity dinner coming up soon. The treasure pavilion was crowded with socialites, who wanted to dress up beautifully and shine at the dinner. As soon as I entered, I saw a familiar face. It was my cousin, Evelyn. Evelyn was my uncle's daughter. She was forthright and cheerful, and we had been on good terms since we were children. When we met, we greeted each other affectionately. She didn't know the inside story and comforted me about the broken engagement. At this time, the shop assistant came up to me with several pieces of jewelry and said politely, "Miss Mia, these are the pieces of jewelry ordered by Mrs. Nathaniel here. Are you satisfied with them?" Among these pieces of jewelry, the most precious one was the jade bracelet in the middle. The bracelet was warm and smooth, with a delicate texture, but there was a little variegated color inside. However, it was a white jade with a small flaw, and the flaw did not hide its virtue. Evelyn also commented beside me, "This bracelet is nice. Mia, try it on." I nodded. However, just as I was about to pick it up, Emma's hand pressed on the bracelet. She raised her eyes, looking wronged and stubborn. "Sister, my wedding is approaching, and I'm short of a few pieces of jewelry. For the sake of our sisterhood, please give me this bracelet." I couldn't blame her for being anxious. Because of the charity dinner, all the good things had been picked by others, and it was too late to have something custom made. After she finished speaking, she put the bracelet on her own hand. Before I could say anything, Evelyn couldn't stand it anymore. "Why should I give it to you? Have you no shame? You not only stole your sister's fiancé, but also want to snatch her jewelry. You..." "Enough." Suddenly a voice interrupted her. Ethan rushed over and protected Emma behind him, glaring at me. Ethan looked at me furiously. Mama bit her lip and stood behind him, looking wronged, and tears fell patter. The people around were attracted by the commotion here and gathered around to watch. Ethan looked around and said coldly to me, "Mia, do you have to be so heartless and humiliate Emma in public? You know that Emma is not at fault. It's just that I don't like you and don't want to marry you." "I like her. Yes, Emma is just an illegitimate daughter, but she is simple and kind. As her sister, you put on airs at home. Now, you are bullying her outside." I was baffled. Leaving aside that it was Emma who wanted my bracelet that caused the trouble just now. Just talking about bullying. I hadn't even opened my mouth, so how could I be bullying her? On the contrary, Ethan's accusation against me made everyone really think that I was bullying her at home because of my status as the elder sister. Some people had already started pointing at me. My eyes also darkened. "Which eye of yours saw me bullying her?" Evelyn also said, "Yeah, it was me who couldn't stand Emma's hypocritical look and couldn't help scolding her." "What does it have to do with Mia?" Ethan snorted coldly. "Everyone knows that you have a good relationship with Mia. She must have asked you to say that." Evelyn was furious. Just as she was about to speak, I stopped her. I stepped forward and met Ethan's gaze and asked, "Do you know how this quarrel started?" Ethan frowned slightly. It was obvious that he didn't know anything just now. He only saw Emma crying and rushed to stand up for her. I sneered. I pointed at the bracelet on Emma's hand. "It's because your sweetheart snatched my jade bracelet." Hearing this, Ethan looked at Emma's hand. A look of surprise appeared on his angry face, and there was a trace of imperceptible complexity. His brows furrowed even deeper. When Emma saw Ethan looking over, she looked like a frightened fawn. She looked wronged and scared. "Yes, sister misunderstood. I just took it to have a look." As she spoke, she lowered her head, as if trying to hold back, but the tears still couldn't stop flowing. "I'm just an illegitimate daughter and haven't seen any good things. I just want to buy some dowry before marrying into the Ethan family so as not to be looked down upon. I know that sister has an opinion of me because of the engagement, but I never thought of snatching sister's things." The more she talked, the more tears fell. Ethan had felt a little guilty at first for accusing me without knowing the truth. After hearing her words, that guilt disappeared, and only the love and pity for her remained. "It's just a bracelet. Since Emma likes it, Mia, just give it to her," Ethan said in a matter-of-fact tone. It was just like in the previous life when he protected Emma again and again. Now, when he opened his mouth, he was still protecting her. The bitterness of the previous life seemed to well up in my heart again. I stared straight at him. Ethan, why? Why should I get into Emma? Ethan paused and avoided my gaze. Ma gently tugged at his sleeve. Brother Ethan, forget it. I'm of low status and don't deserve such a good bracelet. Ethan trembled all over, and the hesitant look in his eyes became firm, with love and pity replacing his guilty conscience. He took a deep breath and faced me. Just because I'm the heir of the Ethan Group, and Emma will be the future president's wife of the Ethan Group. Mia, is this reason enough for you to hand over the bracelet? His eyes were cold, exuding the pressure of a superior. I suddenly felt ironic. Power. How could I have forgotten that? My face felt as if I had been slapped, burning hot. The eyes of the people around seemed to be mocking my overestimating my own abilities. Who did I think I was, daring to not give the heir of the Ethan Group face? Behind Ethan, Emma had a trace of veiled pride in her eyes. And I had to bow my head to them. Fine. However, just as I opened my mouth, a deep male voice came from behind. What's the commotion? Let me have a look too. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound. Then Daniel walked in leisurely. He was wearing a black windbreaker, with sharp eyes and a powerful aura. The crowd fell silent. Although the Jin Yuan was a high-end jewelry store, it was still rare for the head of the military intelligence department to visit in person. Although Daniel was young and promising, he worked for the country and dealt with secret matters, so it was not easy to see him. His long and narrow eyes swept over everyone. It seemed that his eyes stayed on me for a moment, and then he casually looked away. What happened? He asked casually. The store manager quickly stepped forward and told him the situation. Daniel's eyes turned to me and sized me up. You are the daughter of Drive. Nathaniel Mia? I heard that you just broke off the engagement with Ethan of the Ethan Group not long ago? I nodded quickly. I thought that even Daniel had heard about my broken engagement with Ethan. I didn't know what he meant by bringing it up suddenly. Just as I was feeling uneasy, I heard him say, you have a good appearance, but your taste is not good. What? I didn't understand what Daniel meant. The others also looked at each other in confusion. At this time, Daniel suddenly said, I mean the jade bracelet that Miss Mia was looking at is not a good product. The jade has a flaw. It's better not to want it. You deserve something better. Something better? Perhaps I looked a bit stupid at that moment, and a trace of a smile appeared on Daniel's cold face. I have a good thing here which matches you. I hope you won't dislike it. As he spoke, he took out an exquisite jewelry box from his pocket. After opening it, there was a crystal-clear jade bracelet inside. Without even looking at it, he handed the bracelet to me. I was stunned. Even after Daniel left, I still hadn't reacted. Holding the jade bracelet in my hand, I didn't know whether to wear it or put it down. The people around also looked at me with complicated expressions. Ethan said in a dropped voice, Do you know Daniel? There was eagerness and anger in his tone. What does it have to do with you whether I know him or not? I didn't bother to pay attention to him. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. Why did he stand up for you? There were complex emotions surging in his eyes, and his hand holding my arm unconsciously exerted more force. I sneered. Ethan, please behave yourself, your Fang Qi is still watching. Ethan was taken aback. When he met Emma's gaze, he unconsciously relaxed his grip. I took the opportunity to shake off his hand. After saying goodbye to Evelyn, I got in the car and went home. In the car, I looked at the bracelet in my hand. My heart was not as calm as I showed. What did Daniel mean? Did he just want to help me? Impossible, it couldn't be. As far as I knew, Daniel was not a kind person who would feel pity when seeing others in trouble. I was more inclined to another possibility. But why? Recalling every bit of my contact with him, including the previous life, it was only twice. In this life, this was the first time we met today. Could it be that he fell in love with me at first sight? I shook my head and quickly denied this unreliable idea. The head of the intelligence department, who was rumored to be ruthless, how could he be so innocent? It was absolutely impossible. After thinking about it and not being able to figure it out, my eyes fell on the bracelet again. After a moment of hesitation, I put it on. When I got home, Ethan had already found another car for Emma and sent her back. As soon as they came back, Ethan said coldly to me, "You still don't admit that you bullied Emma. You actually left her alone at the Jin Yuan and left in the car by yourself." No looked at me pitifully behind him. "Brother Ethan, stop talking. Sister definitely didn't do it on purpose." I felt a twinge of guilt for a moment. I was confused because of Daniel, and I really forgot about Emma this time. But even though I forgot, I would never admit it. "You were there, weren't you? I created an opportunity for you to be alone together. You should thank me. Why are you blaming me?" Ethan was at a loss for words. His behavior today was already strange. Since he believed that I deliberately left Emma there, he should just comfort Emma. Why did he come to me like this? "If you two have nothing else to do, please leave." I gave him the cold shoulder. But for some reason, Ethan didn't seem to want to leave. "You're going to the reception too, right?" he suddenly asked. I was impatient. What does it matter to Ethan whether I go or not? Ethan should focus on Emma. After all, she is the one you're willing to give up everything for and want to marry. Ethan was stunned. He turned his head and saw Emma looking at him expectantly. His heart softened, and he raised his head and said loudly, "No'll naturally go to the reception, and she will definitely shine and amaze the audience." When he said this, even Emma was surprised. I looked at him strangely. I thought that maybe he was confused after being reborn. Because in the previous life, it was me who shined at the reception. On the day of the reception, my aunt prepared a pink dress for me. I didn't like it and changed into a light green one. "Isn't it too plain?" my aunt asked. I didn't say much. When I met Emma on the way out, as expected, I saw that she was wearing pink. My aunt mumbled behind me. Fortunately, the eldest lady changed her clothes. Otherwise, she would have the same outfit as the second lady. I smiled faintly and didn't say anything. It was the same in the previous life. I heard that Ethan would also be at the reception. To attract his attention, I deliberately chose a glamorous outfit. But I didn't expect that Emma also chose the same color. We already looked somewhat alike, and with the clothes, we looked even more similar. We were even talked about by others at that time. If I hadn't performed well on the business negotiations at the reception later, who knows what kind of joke would have been made. So this time I avoided it in advance. The car took me and Emma to the hotel. After getting out of the car, the waiter led us into the banquet hall. As soon as I entered, I saw Ethan. He was sitting in the VIP seat. When he saw Emma come in, his eyes lit up. He even came down to pick her up in person. I couldn't help but think of the bitterness of the previous life. In the previous life, I was full of joy and wanted to see him, but he just glanced at me from a distance and then turned to talk to others. He didn't even see clearly what I looked like. Because he didn't care about me, it didn't matter what I looked like. It was the same in this life. Because he cared about Emma, he gave her dignity in public. I lowered my eyes inferently. Thinking of these things now, I didn't feel wronged or unwilling. I just thought that I was really pitiful at that time. I gave all my love to someone who didn't know how to cherish it. He wasn't worthy. I was a bit dispirited. Ethan had already come up to us, and Emma greeted him. I nodded slightly as a greeting. Just as I was about to turn around, Ethan suddenly grabbed me. He looked surprised. As if he saw something incredible. So he blurted out, "Why is this necklace with you?" Everyone was taken aback. "Necklace? What necklace?" My gaze turned to the Cartier necklace around my neck. "This is mine, so it's naturally with me." "Yours?" Ethan's expression became even more shocked. He looked at me and then at Emma, hesitating to speak. I was impatient and ignored him, not knowing what his purpose was. But when I turned around, I suddenly thought of a possibility. This possibility made my heart tighten. I even held my breath. I suddenly turned my head to look at Emma, and she looked confused. However, we were so alike. If I hadn't changed my clothes, we would have been almost identical. She didn't have the Cartier necklace, but I did. But I clearly remembered that after I performed well in the business negotiations at the reception, I gave this necklace to Emma. Because she didn't have suitable jewelry. I slowly exhaled. In fact, I never understood how Ethan fell in love with Emma in the previous life. I only knew that Ethan caught a glimpse of a girl at the reception and fell in love at first sight. From then on, she had a place in his heart. And that girl was Emma. But I really couldn't remember what outstanding performance I had at the reception that made people remember her. Instead, it was me who shined. Thinking of Ethan's inexplicable confidence in Emma. And his surprise at this necklace. It was only natural for me to have this thought. What if he mistook someone else for her? I didn't continue to think about it. Because Daniel came out. He had several assistants following him. Everyone was surprised again. Not for anything else, because Daniel had never participated in any reception before. He didn't show up even at the important events held by the Ethan group. He didn't appear in the previous life either. He had been showing up quite frequently recently. The purpose of the reception was for socializing. After Daniel said some polite words, the people scattered in twos and threes. Mo was naturally with Ethan. But Ethan seemed a bit absent-minded. His flustered eyes occasionally swept towards me and quickly moved away. I was annoyed by the sight of him. Just as I was about to stay away from him, I caught a glimpse of Daniel walking towards me. I paused. I instinctively stood up straighter and touched my temples to see if my hair was in place. Daniel wasn't wearing his signature black windbreaker today. Instead, he was wearing a dark blue suit, looking less fierce and more noble. "Miss Mia, I hope you've been well," he said with a smile. I couldn't help but smile and nodded to him. "Daniel, I hope you're well too." Others said that he was ruthless and they were afraid of him. But I wasn't. When I saw him, I could only think of that helpless snowy day. He reached out his hand to me when I was at my most desperate. That was one of the few warm moments I felt in my previous life. So even if this life started anew and he didn't remember anything, I wouldn't hide my good feelings and gratitude towards him. Ethan fell in love at first sight with a girl at a glance. And I remembered someone because of his help. Perhaps, everything was already destined. Daniel accompanied me for a walk. As we walked, we chatted. I casually tugged at my sleeve, revealing the bracelet on my wrist. When Daniel saw the bracelet on my wrist, his smile deepened. "Do you like this bracelet?" "Yes, I do. This bracelet is a family heirloom of mine." I was stunned. Even though I had guessed it, my heart still tightened. After thinking for a while, I looked up at him. "Daniel, will you regret it? My family background is ordinary, and I don't deserve your status." Daniel looked at me without hesitation, his eyes firm. "These things don't matter. In my heart, I hope it's you." I lowered my head. I could hardly control the urge to cry. It turned out that this was what it felt like to be firmly chosen by someone. It was as if a thick fog rose on the long road. When the sun came out, the fog dissipated. Only clarity remained. I went back to the banquet hall with Daniel. As soon as we entered, everyone's eyes were on us, and I could occasionally hear some whispers. I could guess what they were saying. It was nothing more than why Daniel, who had been indifferent to women for so long, was walking with me, a woman whose engagement had been broken off. Daniel also noticed these gazes. He gave a cold glance around. Well, it was quiet. I couldn't help but want to laugh. At this time, his assistant waved and called Daniel over. Daniel had no choice but to go. I met the assistant's gaze, and he nodded politely at me. As soon as Daniel left, Ethan quickly walked up to me. He asked in an accusatory tone, "Where did you go with Daniel just now?" I definitely didn't have a good expression for him. "What does it matter to you where we went?" Ethan was taken aback, but he still said coldly, "I advise you not to have any improper thoughts. With Daniel's status, you're not good enough for him." I gave him a disdainful look and didn't bother to pay attention to him. But he kept looking at me as if he wanted to say something but held back. He was afraid of getting an answer that was contrary to his perception. Just then, the host announced the Business Project Roadshow, and all guests who were interested could participate in the investment. I didn't move. In the previous life, I tried so hard to attract Ethan's attention. In this life, without me having to show off, the person who pays attention to me has already noticed me. Others are irrelevant. But Ethan suddenly became agitated. He walked up to Emma and said to her, "Emma, go quickly. You will definitely shine and come out on top." I don't know why, but his tone was tense, as if he was waiting to confirm something. Emma looked confused. Under Ethan's gaze, she said timidly, "But I don't know anything about investment." Ethan was struck like by lightning. "What did you say? Say it again." He suddenly raised his voice and all eyes turned to us, looking at him strangely. Ethan seemed oblivious. He just stared at Emma. Emma trembled. I can't invest." Ethan's face turned pale in an instant. He stood there blankly for a while. "It's impossible, it can't be. How could this be?" He suddenly reached out and grabbed Emma's arm. "How could this be? You clearly told me that Cartier necklace was yours. You clearly said you had a good business mind, you clearly said so." I didn't. When did I say that?" Mama was in so much pain that tears fell. Ethan stood there dumbfounded. After a moment, he slowly turned to me. I let out a sneer. I just felt it was absurd. When did she say that? She must have said it in the previous life. Emma's mother was a hostess. How could she teach Emma business knowledge? My mother was a businesswoman, and she taught me the ways of business since I was a child. Ethan mistook someone else for the right person. So Emma played along with the mistake. Anyway, their relationship was destined to be unknown to others. Ethan. How ridiculous. You've been regretful for a lifetime. You've been in pain for a lifetime. And what's the result? The figure you couldn't get in the previous life. It was me. The me who was married to you, ignored by you, and loathed by you. Ethan took a step forward, trying to touch me. However, before he could reach me, a tall figure blocked him. Daniel had a half smile, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. "Ethan is drunk. Someone, take Ethan away to sober up." Ethan opened his mouth but didn't say a word in the end. Ma looked at his retreating figure. After hesitating for a moment, she didn't step forward. When the banquet ended, Daniel came out to see me off. When no one was looking, he took my hand. On the surface, he looked normal. But if you looked closely, the tips of his ears were red. "I will make arrangements as soon as possible and propose to you formally. Also, there's no need to be in such a hurry." I suddenly stammered. "No, I'm in a hurry." When he let go of my hand, I felt my face burning. When I got home, Ethan was already waiting at the Mia family. When he saw us come in, he quickly greeted us. Ma ran towards him shyly. "Brother Ethan, why are you?" But Ethan seemed not to see her. He bypassed her and came up to me. "Mia, listen to my explanation. I was wrong. I didn't know it was you. Please give me another chance, okay? I promise I will treat you well this time." He didn't try to hide what he said. I heard it, my parents and Amelia heard it, and the servants around also heard it. I swept around and saw the shocked expressions on their faces. I said expressionlessly, "Get lost." Ethan said anxiously, "I know you still have feelings for me. Otherwise, why did you keep tolerating me? Why did you try so hard to win me back? And why did you take great pains to take care of the company and manage the family business?" I was wrong. I really was. I will break off the engagement with Emma today and propose to you again. We will love each other as husband and wife and never be separated again, okay? There was sincerity, pleading, and caution in his tone. But when I heard it, I just felt disgusted. He knew. He knew how I felt about him. He knew how much I had given for him. He always knew. But he still treated me like that. "Ethan, I will never, ever forgive you," I said. "Mia," he wanted to call me. I turned around and slapped him hard. Slap. He was stunned. I ignored him and turned to leave. When I passed by Emma, she looked at me helplessly. She was so shocked by the word break off the engagement, that her mind went blank. She didn't understand what was going on at all. The people around were just as confused as her. First, he broke off the engagement, and then he proposed to me. Was he playing around? After I went back to my room, my mother came to me and asked me what was going on. After all, they didn't know the whole story and were confused by Ethan's series of actions. Didn't he break off the engagement first? Why is he proposing to you again? Is he being shameless? I have to say, those two words summed it up perfectly. But I didn't want to talk about it with my mother. Although Ethan's retribution made me feel satisfied, I wanted to share my true joy with my mother even more. I showed her the bracelet on my wrist and told her about Daniel. My mother was terrified. She confirmed with me again and again. You mean the head of the military intelligence department? Yeah. You mean that cold-blooded person? Yeah. You mean Daniel? Yeah. After confirming, my mother was in a state of shock. You said you had no thoughts about him the other day? I avoided her gaze guiltily. I didn't know how he felt about me at that time. My mother looked hesitant. I held my mother's hand. I know what you're worried about. I can't guarantee anything about Daniel, but I can guarantee myself. I had a dream. In the dream, I kept tolerating and compromising and suffered a lot. It was only when I woke up that I suddenly realized that while I was in love with someone else, the first person I should love is myself. I'm no longer afraid of reputation, and I'm not afraid of social status either. Mom, I'm someone worthy of being loved, and I also have the ability to love others. My mother fell into deep thought because of my words. She stood there in a daze for a long time, and then she suddenly asked me, if I divorce your father, will it make you feel awkward? I smiled. No, not at all. My mother seemed to have made a decision. She started not to care about my father's favor for Amelia, and was at ease using the family's money to prepare my dowry. Well, as the mistress of the house, she had the final say on how much money to use. The day after the charity dinner, Daniel sent someone to propose on his behalf. His mother came to our house in person, showing her great respect for me. She took my hand, and there was a faint sense of relief as if she had finally solved a big problem. Good girl, in our family, women have a higher status than men. You can make any request you have. I was taken aback. My future mother-in-law and I smiled at each other, and there was a tacit understanding in our eyes. Where there are people who are happy, there are also those who are disappointed. Ethan always wanted to see me. When I refused, he waited at the gate of the Mia family every day. Later, Daniel invited him to the intelligence department, and he stopped waiting there. But he started to visit Emma frequently. He wanted to break off the engagement with Emma, but the Ethan family wouldn't allow it this time. He had no choice but to start with Emma. If Emma wanted to break off the engagement, the Ethan family couldn't say anything either. He seemed to be obsessed. He came to see her whenever he had time, not feeling annoyed at all. Mima naturally didn't want to break off the engagement. She was just an illegitimate daughter. A family as good as the Ethan group was hard to come by. Such a good thing falling from the sky, she naturally held onto it tightly. And she felt wronged. It was real grievance. She really didn't do anything. The person who had treated her tenderly and cherished her as a treasure the day before had changed his attitude completely. He even said some inexplicable things to her and shifted the blame for no reason. She even suspected that Ethan was crazy. She secretly asked someone to examine him. Gabriel came. Gabriel smiled slightly and didn't comment on Ethan who left. Instead, he looked at her. Past causes led to future effects. You reap the good deeds of others in the previous life, so in this life, you have to bear the bad consequences she suffered. Noel was confused. But Emma didn't stay confused for long. As my wedding day was approaching, I had to go out to choose jewelry and buy clothes. By accident, I was seen by Ethan. He grabbed the hem of my clothes in a sorry state and asked me timidly if I could refrain from marrying someone else. Ma saw the scene. Her fiancé gave her a cold look but was extremely attentive to another woman. She couldn't stand it anymore. She rushed over and asked me what I had said to Ethan and why he had become like this. I said calmly. I didn't say anything. He just discovered the real you. Ma's expression changed dramatically in an instant. As I left, I heard her gritting her teeth behind me. I will never give Ethan to you. What a joke. I already have Daniel, a man as precious as fine jade. What use is that defective product, Ethan? I didn't care about it. However, a big thing happened in the Mia family a few days later. When Emma's servant woke her up in the morning, they found someone in the living room. Ethan came out of her room drunk, with his clothes in disarray. When he saw everyone looking at him, he understood what was going on. He stared angrily into the room. Was it you? You drugged me. How could you do such a thing? Have you no shame? Ma just cried. She cried pitifully. She cried guiltily. She cried triumphantly. The situation was a foregone conclusion. Even if he didn't want to, he had to marry her. Noah's wedding date was even earlier than mine. Because they couldn't wait. So there was no grand ceremony, no glory, and she got married in a hurry. Ma became the president's wife of the Ethan group that she had always dreamed of. But she didn't seem very happy. Just because Ethan was cold and disgusted towards her. She tried her best to please him, and she took great pains, but Ethan remained unmoved. When I looked at her, it was like looking at myself in a mirror. I was just like her in the previous life. But I had more dignity than her. Ethan wasn't happy either. He was completely caught up in the obsession of the previous and this life. Obviously, if he let go, there would be a better outcome. But he couldn't let go. Just like in the previous life, he had always been chasing after that unattainable figure. It was the same in this life. But in the previous life, he didn't cherish what he got. In this life, he really couldn't get what he wanted. Well, I had an epiphany. I felt relieved. I was relieved to know that they weren't having a good time. The wedding day between Daniel and me came quickly. My mother prepared a generous dowry for me, saying that it was to support me and not let others look down on me. In fact, she was overthinking it. On the wedding day, Daniel gave me a small box. Inside are all the properties, land deeds, shops, and bank accounts under my name. They have been notarized. They are all yours. I will also give you my salary in the future. Honey, it's getting late. We should rest. Wait, I have something to say. Let's talk in bed. I was so angry that I wanted to hit him. At least give me a chance to speak. At the end of my consciousness, I had a dream. I dreamed of that snowy day when I got lost on the mountain road. I was almost frozen stiff. Eamon in a black windbreaker came up to me. Are you okay? Let me take you home. In a trance. The man's face overlapped with the person in front of me. He leaned over and whispered in my ear. Whether it's the previous life or this life, I will always love you. Lucas and Luna made me run around in circles for money. I broke up with my parents and married him. It was only when I was pregnant that I found out that the two of them were a couple. The so-called best friend who claimed to love me was just after my money. When I had an argument with him, I was pushed down the stairs and died. The baby also died in my womb. After being reborn, while taking revenge on them, I discovered how kind Julian was to me. In my previous life, due to my infatuation, I was bent on being with that scumbag Lucas. I got married to him despite my parents' opposition. After marriage, his true nature was revealed. He made me do the laundry and mop the floor, and serve his gambling-addicted parents. Because of the argument with Lucas, I was pushed down the stairs by him when I was pregnant, and both I and the baby lost our lives. I deeply regret it. I shouldn't have severed ties with my parents and married him. Fortunately, God has eyes. I was reborn on the day he entered my house. I saw Lucas sitting on the sofa in a sleazy manner and ordering Arya to serve him tea. I instinctively touched my flat belly and then looked at my mother sitting beside me. She was still radiant, unlike in my previous life when she turned white-haired overnight because of me. In my previous life, I was really blinded by love and actually fell for that guy Lucas. I will definitely treat Sophia well. He held up 3 fingers and stared straight at my mother. My mother didn't even glance at him. If it weren't for me, Lucas wouldn't have even been able to enter the door today. There was a dead silence. According to the plan that Lucas and I had previously discussed, he came over and took my hand. Uncle, Sophia is already pregnant now. Before my parents could react, I immediately slapped him. I have never crossed the line with you. How can you make up such lies? In my previous life, I was extremely stupid. The idea of pretending to be pregnant was even thought up by me. Just because Lucas said that he would treat me well and that we would live a two-person life in the countryside and stay away from the worldly affairs, I believed him. Lucas covered his face and looked at me in disbelief. Sophia, what's wrong with you? My parents suddenly stood up from the sofa and tightly held my hands. Daughter, is he threatening you? I nodded, and the next second, Lucas was thrown out by the bodyguards. My parents kept comforting me by my side, afraid that I would be wronged. In my previous life, I cooperated with Lucas, which made my father have a heart attack and be sent to the hospital. He almost didn't make it. I hugged him tightly. Dad, I don't want to marry him. I just want to stay by your side. In my previous life, I wasn't close to my parents. I just fooled around all day long. My family had hundreds of millions in assets. My parents were so busy every day that I thought they didn't love me. I even thought they were too controlling, so I was easily coaxed by Lucas's few words. Don't worry about me. I can handle it. With my parents' temper, if they knew about my experience in my previous life, they would definitely not let him go. But the matter of being reborn is hard for people to accept, and it's more satisfying to take revenge with my own hands. When I returned to my room, the screen of my phone lit up. It was a call from Lucas. Honey, what's going on? Didn't we have an agreement? His tone on the other end of the phone was very gentle, even a bit doting, as if it wasn't him who was tied up and thrown out by the bodyguards just now. I responded in a coquettish voice. I was afraid that my parents would be sad, so I did that. He believed me and made an appointment to come again next time. Lucas was a gambling adept, perfectly inheriting it from his parents. At this moment, he had already owed hundreds of thousands of yuan. In my previous life, I didn't know about his debts until after I got married. Because I broke up with my parents, I didn't have a dowry. I only had bags and jewelry, but they were all of great value. After I turned all my bags and jewelry into cash to pay off the debts, his true colors were revealed. Only then did I realize that his so-called love for me was just to get money to pay off his debts. I gripped my phone tightly, and my blood vessels bulged due to excessive force. Lucas, I will definitely not let you have an easy life in this life. I went to the window, and as expected, Lucas was outside. He looked at me with a smile on his face. After making a hard gesture in the direction of my window, he twisted his body and left in what he thought was a very handsome walking posture. In his eyes, I was always obedient. In my previous life, when he said that his mother was ill and urgently needed 50,000 yuan, I gave it to him without hesitation. It was no exception that he was waiting for me here. He probably thought that I would go out and try to win him back. At mealtime, my family had dinner together as usual. The rule of not talking during meals had always been in my family, but it was broken because of Lucas this time. My mother stroked my hand. Sophia, if there's anything, tell your parents. We will always support you. Looking at the pain in my mother's eyes, I knew that I had made her worry. If I said that he had bullied me, Lucas would be ruined tomorrow, but that would be too good for him. I just misjudged him. Don't worry about me. I've always been very assertive and had been able to solve things on my own since I was a child. Seeing that I was calm and didn't look like I had been bullied at all, they didn't ask any more questions. In my memory, 2 days before Lucas entered my house, he said that his mother was ill and he had run out of savings. He came to me and asked for 30,000 yuan, not wanting to come empty-handed. Today he clearly didn't buy any gifts and came empty-handed. It's obvious what happened to that 30,000 yuan. After dinner, I drove a Maserati to a casino. In my previous life, Lucas often gambled here. Every time I got my salary, he would take it away and squander it all within a few days. Just as I got out of the car and was about to enter the casino, Luna called. I looked coldly at Luna's name on the screen, exuding a chill all over. When I answered the phone, I greeted her in a cute voice. Luna, you haven't asked me to go shopping for a long time. Anna's sweet and soft voice came from the other end of the phone. Shall we go shopping together tomorrow? Memories flooded in. It was thanks to her that Lucas and I got together. I suppressed my nausea and replied, okay, I'm really looking forward to it. I walked into the casino, and as expected, Lucas was there. At the gambling table, he was looking smug, with a stack of cash in front of him, and his mouth was almost up in the air. He kept betting money round after round and never lost. At this moment, the cash in front of him had piled up into a small hill. In the dark corner, two men dressed in black were observing Lucas's every move. Their lips moved. It's time to close the net. When I was bored in college, I took a Lipperdine class. I could tell what they were saying. I hurried over. I was wearing Chanel and holding the key to a Ferrari. When the two men saw me, they paused and didn't continue walking towards Lucas. I was scared as I was unfamiliar with the casino, but with money, many problems could be solved. I took out a check from my bag and waved my hand, writing down a series of numbers. Guys, could you do me a favor? At the same time, I showed them the check. When the two men saw the amount on the check, their tense bodies gradually relaxed. Madam, there's nothing we can't do in this casino. Just tell us what you want. I pointed at Lucas. Let him win first. When he puts all his money into the game, make him lose several million. They eagerly took the check and slapped their chests to guarantee, we will definitely make him lose everything. I sat on the VIP chair they arranged and watched the show. By chance, I met the gaze of a man, and I felt a sense of familiarity. After thinking for a long time, those eyes were very similar to those of Julian, my little follower. But he had always been a bit silly. The man in front of me had sharp eyes and exuded a cold air. The eyes were really alike. In a short while, Lucas had put all his money into this round. I watched as he lost 4 million yuan. He was scratching his ears and cheeks at the gambling table, and his hands and legs were shaking constantly. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the shoulder of the person next to him. You said that I was lucky today, and now I've lost so much money. You have to pay for it. As a result, he was beaten up by that man, the black-clothed man just now. The next day, Luna asked me to go shopping at the mall, saying that we should buy nice clothes to make Lucas take a new look at me and care more about me. I sneered. In my previous life, I was infatuated with him and did everything to please him. This time, I will live for myself. When we arrived at the mall, Luna affectionately took my hand. This dress doesn't suit you. You should wear something bright so that Lucas will like you more. These clothes were all picked by Luna. Before that, I always wore high-end luxury clothes and liked a simple and elegant style. Just because she said that Lucas liked those clothes, I bought countless cheap clothes from street stalls. And at this moment she was wearing high-end luxury clothes, which were all taken from me. In my previous life, I was so obsessed that I didn't even think about whether her words were reasonable. My parents were on business trips all year round, and they didn't even know when I changed my dressing style. Before I met them, I always went around alone. When Julian was around, I had a great time chatting with him, but he suddenly disappeared in the year I went to college. Let's go in and take a look. She was visibly happy, and her eyes almost turned into slits with a smile. She wandered around the store, constantly ordering the staff to help her put on shoes and so on. In the past, I was like a lackey, quietly watching her pick out clothes. Sophia, this dress suits you so much. It was the ugliest dress in the store, and it was extremely expensive, priced at 99,999 yuan. In the past, I would buy all the clothes she said suited me. Where does it suit me? She praised the dress vigorously, as if she was exaggerating the grass into a flower. This beautiful dress will definitely look even better on you. I looked at her in surprise. My lips opened and closed. This was the first time I had refuted her words. The waiter beside us immediately chimed in, "Madam, you're as beautiful as a fairy. You'll definitely look great in this dress." In the end, she reluctantly took this dress and all the other clothes she had tried on. I lazily sat on the sofa and quietly watched her. After a while, Luna came over and grabbed me. "Sophia, aren't you going to buy any clothes?" I didn't answer. "There's a new romantic movie coming out tomorrow night. I've already bought 3 tickets. I'll find an opportunity to help you and Lucas get closer." I said indifferently, "Okay. I'll go to the movie, but I won't buy any clothes. I still have a lot at home." In the end, she swiped 3 bank cards to pay. I vaguely heard the waiters gossiping. I thought she was really rich. She had to swipe 3 cards to pay. How can this person be so pretentious? Luna walked out of the store with a red face. I walked beside her and could feel her looking at me sideways from time to time. When I turned to look at her, she had a beaming smile on her face. She had spent no less than 400,000 yuan just now, and all the clothes she had taken from me before would have to be returned. She never knew that this entire mall was owned by my family. I didn't take the initiative to say it, and the employees didn't recognize me either. What's 400,000 or 500,000 yuan? Every piece of clothing I gave her cost at least 100,000 yuan. "Sophia, let's go eat Japanese food. There's a new restaurant nearby. It's said to be very delicious, and it's also great for taking photos. Make sure to take nice photos of me. I want to send the photos to brother Lucas." In the Japanese restaurant, she did take photos of me, but they were all from terrible angles. "Don't worry. Lucas likes this kind of thing. I've known him for so many years, and I know him well." "You really do know him well." Thinking back carefully, all the previous photos were also taken from terrible angles. "I'm going to the restroom." I picked up my bag and went out. She was too busy taking selfies to notice. Every time she wanted to take good photos, Luna would always order a lot of expensive dishes, and in the end, I was the one who stupidly paid for them. When I first met her, it was in a restaurant. She was a waitress, and I was a customer. She was scolded by the store manager and dropped my dishes. Out of kindness at that time, I became good friends with her, and that's how I met Lucas. I walked out of the Japanese restaurant and sent a message. "There's an urgent matter at my home, so I'm leaving first. Thank you for the photos you took." I laughed out loud, imagining how furious Luna would be. That night, as expected, Lucas called. "Baby Sophia, my mother's condition has worsened, and my dad hit me because I didn't have the money to pay the medical bills." He attached a photo of himself with a bruised face. "Oh, is that so?" There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. "Baby Sophia, can you lend me 500,000 yuan? I will definitely treat you even better after we get married." I looked at my parents who were cooking dinner for me in the kitchen. "Only a fool would break up with them because of you." I hung up the phone. In my previous life, I always thought that my parents didn't love me because they were often on business trips. But I ignored the fact that every time they were done with work, they spent all their time with me. They went on business trips to give me a better life. "Sophia, Julian is here." "Julian?" He was wearing a black coat and his black, broken hair covered his eyebrows and eyes. His dark eyes looked at me. As our eyes met, I suddenly remembered something. Could he be? He got up from the sofa and walked straight towards me. "Long time no see. I heard that you have a boyfriend." I instinctively replied, "Nembo." At this time, I had only known Lucas for half a month, and we hadn't even kissed. And I wouldn't in the future either. He seemed to let out a sigh of relief, and his body relaxed. "I'm not late." My face felt like it was on fire. Why did this voice sound so familiar? After I fell in my previous life, I vaguely heard a voice saying, "I'm late. I'm sorry." On the hospital bed. I finished the meal as if I were chewing wax, without any appetite. After he left, I recalled the memories of my previous life. Could it be that because of my rebirth, time was messed up? In my previous life, he never showed up until I died. Why did he show up this time? The next day, I arrived at the cinema as promised. Luna and Lucas didn't notice me behind them. At the moment, the two of them were holding hands and being very affectionate. I took a photo of them holding hands. Pretending that I had just arrived, I said, "I bought popcorn. Let's eat together." Luna's face turned pale immediately. She already had foundation on, and now she looked as white as a ghost. She stood up shakily and pulled me to sit next to Lucas. This movie was about the male-led's family encountering setbacks and owing 5 million yuan in debt. The female-led didn't leave him in his time of need, but chose to help and accompany him. I have to say the two of them really had put in a lot of thought. After coming out of the cinema, Lucas stepped crying to me. "Sophia, I really have no other choice. Can you make up with your parents and lend me 5 million yuan? Seeing that I wasn't moved, he squeezed out a few tears. In my previous life, this was his trump card, and I would give him the money as soon as he did this. "Didn't you say it was 500,000 yuan yesterday?" I knew very well that he wanted the money to pay off his gambling debts, and the so-called illness was just an excuse. I looked at him coldly, wondering what else he could come up with. "My dad told me last night that 500,000 yuan wasn't enough. We need 3 million yuan. Plus, our house was struck by lightning and needs money for repairs." So he knelt down on the ground with a thud. "Sophia, for the sake of the sausages my dad made for you, please help my family. I really have no other way." The sausages weren't made by his dad at all. In my previous life, he bought discounted sausages from the supermarket, and just changed the packaging. I took out the photo I had just taken and shoved it in front of his eyes. "Let's break up." I turned around and walked outside without looking back. Why was Julian here? He was standing at the entrance of the cinema, holding a bouquet of roses and smiling at me. He gave me the roses. Just as I took them, Lucas's enraged roar came from behind. He got up from the ground in a fit of rage. "You two bastards. I knew why Sophia broke up with me. It's all because of you." He pointed at Julian. To my surprise, he actually started hitting people in public. However, Julian wasn't someone to be trifled with. Lucas was no match for him and was knocked down. "When I was 10 years old, I was bullied by the kids in my class. He said, 'I'll learn Taekwondo to protect you.' I thought it was just a joke, but he actually did it. He patted his sleeves and gently touched my head with affection. 'I'll protect you.' It seemed that the person who loved me had always been by my side, and I only realized it after being reborn." Luna didn't hide it anymore and helped Lucas up with a look of distress. "He was beaten so badly by you. You have to pay the medical bills." I directly called the mall manager and had them thrown out. Luna kept glaring at me as she was being thrown out. She kept muttering, "You'll die a miserable death." In my previous life, my death was definitely related to her. The reason I was pushed down the stairs was that I discovered her relationship with Lucas. During the argument with him, I was pushed down. A month later, I had a great time chatting with Julian, and our relationship had deepened a lot. After experiencing all the unpleasant things in my previous life, I could tell that he really liked me. On the night when I confirmed my relationship with him, a message popped up on his phone. We looked at it together. It was a photo of me and Lucas. In the photo, I was wearing a black suspender dress, and he wasn't wearing a shirt. The two of us were lying on the hotel bed. I knew very well that it wasn't me in the photo. It must have been fabricated later. But what would Julian think? I don't want this photo to be leaked. Bring 5 million in cash to the South City warehouse tomorrow. Don't call the police. I thought Julian would be very angry, but he wasn't. I was held in his arms. "Don't worry. I trust you. It turns out that this is what it feels like to be believed unconditionally. 5 million in cash. After paying off the 4 million he owed in the casino, the remaining 1 million would be enough for him and Luna to live on for a long time. He really has a good plan. The next night, Julian and I went to the South City warehouse. Before getting out of the car, I grabbed his hand. It's not worth it for this photo. Besides, it's not real. It's just a later composite. He hugged me back. Anything related to you is worth it. After getting out of the car, we went into the warehouse empty-handed. Before coming here, I didn't see Julian loading the 5 million in cash into the car. I don't know what he's up to. When Lucas saw that we didn't bring the money, he brandished a knife like a madman. Where's the 5 million in cash I want? With a bang, he cut through a piece of wood beside him with the knife. If you don't take it out, not only will I let the photo spread, but the two of you will end up like this piece of wood. I unconsciously tightened my grip on Julian's hand and looked at him worriedly. Don't be afraid. The sound of a car came from outside the warehouse. A moment later, 5 burly men walked in at the door. They were all very strong. When they came in, I was stunned. I actually knew 2 of them. Why are you 2 here? 2 of the 5 burly men were the black-clothed men who had helped me at the casino that day. The 5 of them respectfully called out to Julian, "Boss." Julian waved his hand. "Don't deal with him." I suddenly noticed that each of them had a black thing in their ear. I guessed it was used for passing messages. They were also wearing them that day in the casino. No wonder they had a serious expression just a moment ago, but it changed after I came. If it weren't for Lucas's stunt, I wouldn't have known that Julian was helping me. So the person I saw in the casino that day was him. I still wanted to hear it from his mouth. Was it you that day? It was me. I'm back. I won't let you be wronged again. How did he know that I was wronged? I looked at him in confusion. This couldn't be a coincidence. I unconsciously took half a step back, and he put his arm around my waist. Sophia, I was late in the last life. So in this life, he appeared before I died because he was also reborn. I stared at him in disbelief. Is it true? It's true. Boss, we've got him under control. What's the next step? The knife in Lucas's hand was taken away by them. His face, which had almost fully recovered after a month, was bruised and purple again. He was tied up with ropes, looking like a zombie. Julian looked at me. What do you want to do? I originally wanted to make him suffer so much that he'd rather be dead. I wished I could skin him alive and send him to the 18th level of hell. But now I didn't want to. He had already received his due punishment. It's only right to pay off debts. Let him clean the toilets in the casino every day. At this moment, Luna rushed out from a corner. Similarly, she was holding a knife in her hand. She rushed straight at me, wanting to tear me to pieces. Before I could react, Julian hugged me and dodged. He also kicked Luna away. The 5 burly men also reacted and quickly subdued her. I looked up at him from his arms. Beads of sweat were breaking out on his forehead. The temperature was very low now, so low that it was cold even in a down jacket. He held me tightly, as if he wanted to blend me into his body. Finally, he let me go when I couldn't breathe. He spoke with a sob in his voice. I thought I was going to lose you again. I comforted him. No, I'm still here. Julian's eyes were red. When I rushed to the hospital in the last life, you didn't respond at all. No matter how much I called you, you didn't answer me. It turned out that it was really him in the last life, not my auditory hallucination. I'm here, alive and well. Maybe it was his love that moved the heavens, or maybe it was my hatred that made us both reborn. At this moment, I was very sure of who the person I loved was. It wasn't because I was lacking in love that I loved. Where have you been in the past few years? It's as if you vanished into thin air. Julian lowered his face. I went abroad to learn from my father how to manage our family business. He sighed. I originally thought that when I grew up and had the ability to protect you, I would confess my love to you. But in the end, I saw you lying on the hospital bed, on the verge of death. In the previous life, after I broke up with my parents, I ran away with Lucas. Not many people knew about this. And I died less than a year after marrying Lucas. If I hadn't died, he probably wouldn't have known that I was married. At that time, the doctor couldn't get in touch with your parents. Lucas sent you to the hospital and then ran away. Finally, he contacted me. Fortunately, we have a chance to start over. Yes, after I broke up with my parents, I blocked their phone numbers and deleted all our contact information. After getting married, I regretted it. At that time, I thought that I couldn't go back and make my parents angry again, so I endured and didn't contact them. We held hands and went home. We cooked a meal for my parents and told them that we were dating. This time, my parents didn't object, and they didn't get sick from anger. Everything was fine. Just when I thought that life would go on happily like this, Lucas's father appeared. When Julian and I were out for a walk, he stopped us furiously. He was holding the later composite photo in his hand. "You two scoundrels, you've made my son suffer so much. Now he's thinking every day about how to pay off his debts. All of this is because of you. You must help him pay it off." He pointed at me. "Especially you. When he was in a relationship with you, he asked for a lot of money from home. Each time it was hundreds of dollars, and it was all spent on you." I was stunned. I've seen people with thick skin, but I've never seen someone this thick-skinned. "Did he spend money on me?" He asked for hundreds of dollars each time. Why didn't he mention that he asked me for tens of thousands of dollars? I directly took out the previous transfer records and threw my phone at him. "Open your eyes and take a good look. It was your son who kept asking me for money. Each time it started from tens of thousands of dollars. Do you think it's right for the father to pay off his son's debts?" He visibly panicked and threw the phone away. "How is that possible? You must be deceiving him, you woman. My son is so honest. He would never do such a thing." If I hadn't married into their family in the previous life and known his true face, I might have believed him. He seemed to be a father seeking justice for his son, but in fact, he had no money to gamble, so he came to me. In my previous life, my salary was all used by them for gambling. Originally, even though my bags and jewelry were all sold by them, relying on my own strength, I could still earn more than 10,000 yuan a month. If it weren't for these bloodsuckers, things wouldn't be like this. After all, I was blind and misjudged the person. "Since you're here today, you have to pay me back everything your son owes me." He hurriedly got up from the ground. He had been lying on the ground before, rolling around and throwing a tantrum. He stopped only after seeing the transfer records. "You're talking nonsense. How can you prove that my son borrowed the money? It doesn't say borrow on this record." He lowered his head and was very nervous. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he picked up the photo from the ground. "Anyway, you have to help my son pay off his debts. Otherwise, I'll spread this photo and let everyone see what kind of person you are." Before I could speak, Julian spoke up. "Go ahead and spread it. The lighting in this photo is different. It's obviously much darker on my Sophia's side. If you spread it, I can sue you. Extortion. You might end up in jail for that." Tick-tock. A puddle of water appeared on the floor. That's right, he peed himself out of fear. Julian covered my nose and mouth and took me away from the scene. Unexpectedly, he followed us. "No, I don't want to go to jail. I'll give you the photo back." "I don't want it anymore." He threw the photo on the ground and ran out. Then he suddenly ran back. "My son will pay off his own debts. You can't put it on me." In the end, Lucas's parents cut off all ties with him and went back to the countryside together. And he cleaned the men's toilets in the casino every day, while Luna cleaned the women's toilets, day after day. A year later, Julian and I got married. This time it was completely different from the previous life. Our parents blessed us, and we held a wedding in the presence of our relatives and friends. My parents weren't so angry that they ended up in the hospital. They were in good health and at the wedding. My father led me by the hand and gave me to Julian. And the groom had changed from Lucas to Julian. I was still in the same city and didn't run off to some remote mountain village. After getting married, we were very happy and our family was full of joy. One day, I showed Julian the pregnancy test stick. "You're going to be a father." He was so overjoyed that he cried. Looking at the 2 lines on the pregnancy test stick, he couldn't believe it. "Am I really going to be a father?" He hugged me at first and wanted to spin me around, but then he put me down. "No, you're pregnant. We have to be careful." I smiled. "I'm not showing yet. It's okay." Watching him hold me carefully, I realized what it was like to marry the right person. In my previous life, when I was pregnant, I not only had to go to work, but also do the laundry and cook after getting off work. What a tough life I had led. On that very day he took me to the hospital for a comprehensive checkup and kept asking the doctor what to pay attention to. Moreover, after coming out of the hospital, he took me to the mall and picked out hundreds of baby clothes. "Sophia, do you think the baby in your belly is a boy or a girl?" I asked him in return, "Do you like a boy or a girl?" He answered without hesitation, "A girl, because I want to raise a little you." A year later, the baby was born. As he had wished, it was a girl, and she was doted on like a little princess. Under the streetel twide, he held my hand with his left hand and our child's hand with his right hand as we walked